Number 2 on my list. This is going to be pretty much an obvious one, but acquire an alpha wide receiver 1. And I couldn't care less how you do it. I don't care if you sign the guy. I don't care if you trade for the guy. I am not going to sit there and say you should be drafting Tet McMillan at 4. I think that's a little nuts, honestly, in my own opinion. I think that's too high for Tet. But if I'm looking at all these options, Andrew, you know it, man. There's a lot of options, I think. Tee Higgins, we've already talked about him. A.J. Brown had a very interesting IG post yesterday talking about how winning a championship didn't necessarily make him as happy as he thought it would, and said that he's more thrilled to dominate, which made me wonder, catching 67 footballs this past year, is that kind of a little signal? And you also got Garrett Wilson. What's Garrett Wilson thinking? Aaron Rodgers is gone, right? Who's going to be the quarterback in New York? And I know a lot of people have thrown out DK Metcalf. So just go out and get me a legitimate, bona fide wide receiver 1, an alpha, hopefully a guy that plays on the outside and can make some contested catches.
I like that term alpha. We've not thrown that around enough. It's always diva wide receiver, just number 1, blue chip elite, blah, blah, blah. No. It's some guy who comes in, this is my sideline. This is my ball. These 50-50s or 80-20s. Do you have a preference among all those? A.J.
Brown.
Okay.
I think he's a beast. You want to talk about alpha? I think he's your prototypical alpha. And, you could say DK Metcalf. I know some people have questioned whether or not DK is a great route runner and, how he would fit ultimately. I'd be fine with DK. The one thing about AJ, of course, is he's going to be 28 years old, I think, in June. So you might get 2 or 3 years out of him, but I think he's motivated and he's got that relationship with Vrabel. And I think he's the guy we're talking about, right? The guy who walks into that room and people take him seriously immediately. And Vrabel speaks glowingly of him. So you know for a fact that dude works his tail off, because if he didn't, Vrabel wouldn't be singing his praises.
Right. The familiarity, I think, will be a big piece of this. You look at the staff that Mike assembled, just like a lot of coaches, you bring people that you know. The next step is to bring in players that you know. Yep. I would bet, unless A.J. Brown reads books on how to throw tantrums and get yourself out of an organization, I think he probably is not going to be available, because the Eagles look and go, we have a chance to repeat. And look, receiver is a strength for us, and we should go ahead and just do that. But I do like it because he's the complete package. Yards after the catch, downfield threat, strong, fast, everything you could want, plus a familiarity where there's no kind of risk of just, hey, in the old days with free agency, you would meet with players and then they'd weigh the contracts. It's just boom, who gives me the most money? There's no interaction. There's no learning. So yeah, I think teams more often than not rely on players that they're familiar with. Tee Higgins, where is he on that list? Because I know we've already talked about him, but I think it's interesting. I hear this thought today of maybe the Patriots should do the Bregman thing. Like, give him a short deal with a lot of money. And I've also heard cases for both sides.
Well, the Bregman thing is actually what happened with A.J. Brown. That's what Philly did with A.J. Brown. They gave him a 3-year, I think it was $96 million deal. So, short term with big money, $32 million per year. I would have absolutely no issue if the Patriots did that with Higgins. And Higgins would be second on my list. And I know he's got some soft tissue injury stuff, but you can work through that. That really comes down to the interview process and the conversations that you have with the agent and all that stuff. Like, what was the nature of those injuries? Do you feel like maybe you can change some things about his process, his treatment, and all of that? Maybe it's a Bengals issue as well. But Higgins is up there. He's in the middle of his 20s, and he's a guy who fits perfectly. Drake May, deep ball guy. Tee Higgins, deep ball guy, makes those contested catches. And what I'm interested in, Andrew, from your point of view, do you think T is a 1? Like, I personally think T is a 1, and I think people kind of throw shade at him because he happens to be on the same team as Jamar Chase. I think he could be a 1. Do you think he could be a 1?
I do, and I think the numbers that, as best we can, are independent of your surroundings. He's still catching balls from Joe Burrow. He's still opposite Jamar Chase.
Right.
He's playing within a functioning offense that leans very pass heavy. You look at PFF grades, separation, catch rate, uncatchable passes. All of those are very high and consistently high. So this is a guy who's 26. His best football is ahead of him. He might be facing number 2 corners, or he's getting a number 1 and they double Jamar Chase on the other side, whatever it is. But he's making it work. And that leads me to another guy who I would also call more 1B, right? Like if Tee Higgins comes over and he's the number one, I think he fits that. But it's not alpha in the way you kind of described. Like the 10 dudes in the league, if they want to get open, they're getting open. And that's that. This other player who's number 2 on my list is also a 1B at his peak. He's 28. He's a second best free agent receiver available, and this is Chris Godwin. Now, before dislocating his ankle, which is a big, serious injury that is not to be discounted, he was tracking for career highs in catches, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. Had he remained healthy, Chris Godwin would have had his 5th 1,000-yard season in the last 6 years. Okay, well, he's not always healthy. That's correct. He tore his ACL in 2021, but that did not stop him from a monster season in 2022 when most players go, oh, I really need a year to get back, and then I'm back to myself the following season. Not Chris Godwin. Okay, he's physical. Even when he's injured, this doesn't make sense, but it's true. He's durable, sure-handed, with one of the lowest drop rates of the NFL. Plays inside and out, and I'll leave you with this as far as the stats go. And I'm curious what you think about Godwin, who's obviously not in your top 2, maybe not top 3. When Brady played with him in Tampa, Brady's quotes were as sparkling and positive as I could see that he among receivers he played with. It goes for Welker, it goes with Edelman, it goes with Gronk. What a winning player he was, clutch. He was a captain down there, a guy that he counted on. So if I want someone to pair with Drake May for the next 3 years, who's not only just productive and durable and in his prime, and you can question the durable part, whatever, Chris Godwin is it. Like that's a guy who's a professional in the room, in the locker room, on the offense that they have sorely needed going on years now.
I like him a lot. Now, the one thing I guess I would say I kind of look at him more as an inside than outside guy. He could play outside, but Mike Evans has been that prototypical alpha kind of beast that I'm talking about. So maybe it's just kind of a personality tone kind of deal. But I do really like, if not, I don't know if I'd say love. Maybe I love Godwin. Maybe I could be talked into loving him. But I do think he would be, look, if you're the Patriots and you're in this situation, let's be honest. I mean, I'd be fine if they traded for Cooper Kupp, not as the one, but they need help in that wide receiver room. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, Chris Godwin. No, I would not take, I'd 100% take Chris Godwin. The injuries do scare me a little bit because they're significant injuries. And I wonder how he'll, yes, you can come back after the ACL tear when you're in your mid-20s. Now you're getting into your late 20s. Andrew, I'm a little older than you. I'll tell you, man, the clock is, it takes no mercy from you. It's a little bit more difficult to recover from certain things as you get older. So I would have some questions about that. But you brought up Brady, and it kind of got me thinking about, his ability to transition to the Josh McDaniels offense. I'd have to imagine that Brady, brought, as we know, his offense to Byron Leftwich down in Tampa.
Yeah.
And so, Godwin would have, I would imagine, a pretty good handle on what McDaniels wants to do. So maybe you kind of, you get out of the gates a little bit quicker with Godwin, and he's kind of, shot out of that cannon ready to go day one of camp versus some of these other guys that you don't really know, right? We don't really know how these other guys would transition to this offense. Maybe you buy the idea that Godwin transitions easier.
That's a great point. I hadn't thought about it at all. And there are 2 things on this, because I covered Chris very briefly when he was at Penn State his last year before he declared early, is he's a workout warrior. Like this is all that he does. This is all that he loves. His girlfriend at the time, now wife, is basically his personal trainer. And that's what they do, is they work out and he plays football. Very quiet guy, serious guy, committed, all of those different things, whether it's injuries and rehab or just kind of getting stronger, faster. That's all he's doing all the time. So there's the cultural fit there too. Like if you can play and take the pressure and the heat of being with Tom Brady, greatest of all time, doesn't make him a jerk, but like some guys are just not cut out to play with Tom. He can do that here. The second thing I already forgot, which has escaped me, but Chris Godwin. Oh, I think this is a buy low opportunity too, right? Like Tee Higgins is healthy. He's productive. Chris Godwin, the injuries, for the most part, are a bad thing. You'd rather just a healthy player who's always been healthy. But if there's a time to get him now as he hits free agency, this is it. Coming off of an ankle that, again, dislocation, very serious, but you give him time because he did this in October to recover, come back, study the playbook. And not to mention a guy that, when he walks in, is going to be the best receiver they've had since prime Julian Edelman. So that's just the impact of that, I think, as we just continue to ask for a number one and number one and a number one. Once it gets here, it's going to be, oh my God, it's even better than I expected,
Yeah. And when you get into free agency, this, Andrew, I mean, most guys, the vast majority of guys that hit free agency, they hit free agency for a reason, whether it's age, whether it's durability questions, whether it's somebody has pretty much supplanted them or is about to supplant them from what they do. You can look at the wide receivers in this class as a prime example of that. Now, I think Tee Higgins, different situation because he's with Jamar Chase. I think if he was the only wide receiver there, Chase wasn't there, then he would likely be there long term. And since he might end up being there, although I'll believe it when I see it with Mike Brown. But when you look at the receivers, the rest of this class, man, right? Godwin's got injuries. You got Mike Evans. You look at Amari Cooper. He's older now. What's he going to look like? He didn't look great in Buffalo. Was that just because of the system? What was going on there?
The A in Imani is not for alpha. That's for sure. If we learned anything but the last year or two.
Yeah. And DeAndre Hopkins obviously is long in the tooth. So you start to look at these free agent receivers. And even though Stephon Diggs coming off ACL surgery, there's some big names, but you got to think about who those guys are now. And usually dudes get, they hit free agency because there's some kind of an issue. So no matter if you sign somebody, you're going to be signing somebody with a question, including Godwin.
Yeah. Godwin too, like Higgins, his independent numbers are very, very good. Like he's even been higher most of the season since Tee Higgins got in the league. Say what you will about PFF, and I've said this before. They don't get it wrong at the top or the bottom. They get it wrong in the middle. Okay. So guys that rate really highly as he has, top 20, I think it's 4 of the last 5 years among all receivers. Okay. He's up there. He deserves it, even though he's playing opposite Mike Evans, which we know too, aside from those Brady years. And there are a couple in there, like Jameis was there, obviously Baker Mayfield now. It's not always been perfect or been good quarterbacks throwing to these guys. They produce anyway, both of them. And I think that's a credit to Chris Godwin.